Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another session from Enterprise Rent Car in association with Student Minds. My name is Louise, and I work in the Enterprise Talent team. During our sessions with Student Minds, we have tried to focus on topics and themes that will help you and those around you to deal with times of stress, anxiety, and those times when things all just get a little bit on top of you. For those of you who missed our last session, it was centred on the important topic of looking after your mates and yourself, and the recording can be found on our YouTube so you can catch up. We have a fantastic speaker joining us today in Geraldine Defoe from Therapeutic Consultancies. Geraldine has over 20 years of experience in counselling and mental health professional services in higher education. Geraldine has worked with organisations over the years such as Birmingham City University, Cambridge University and Leicester University, just to name a few. As a graduate recruiter, we interact with so many students at universities on campus and on our graduate scheme and placement scheme. We know how stressful exam time can be, so we really hope this webinar gives you some practical hints and tips to excel and perform to your best abilities whilst under academic pressure. We will be doing a question and answer session at the end of this, so feel free to pop any questions in the chat as they spring to mind, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So with no further ado, I would like to hand you over to the wonderful Geraldine, who is going to be going through some slides today. So Geraldine, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very lovely introduction, Louise. So really good to be talking to you today and to have been asked to speak on behalf of Student Minds. I've been working with students for a very long time now, and it's fair to say that however well we might be feeling in our life in general, it can be quite anxiety provoking when we think about exams. So we'll be talking to you about loads of really helpful tips on how you can support yourself whilst you're thinking about exam and whilst you're going through the exam. So first of all, let me tell you about Student Mind. So Student Mind is a mental health charity that's for students, by students, and been going on for quite a while now. And they're here to help students to look after their own mental health and support themselves and support others as well. It champions a preventative approach to student mental health, thinking at sort of the things that people can do to support themselves, but also looking how we can support students when they have mental health issues, so recognizing mental health issue, helping people to talk more helpfully about issues, and also ongoing support for people who struggle. And there, the really important thing is about thinking that together we can make sure that no student is held back by their mental health. So it's very much about empowering people, supporting people, and having helpful conversation across the board. So first of all, why is student mental health important? Well, I can think of many, many reasons why student mental health is important. And one of the important of student mental health is really about the sheer number of students who attend university at any one time. So we know that at the moment we have about half of the whole student population of young people go to university. So we're thinking about millions of people at any one time or at university. And if people are undergraduate, we also know that this is the age on which mental health issues can develop and become diagnosed. So 75% of mental health problems, for instance, are established by the age of 25. And we also know that young people have mental health issues. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that in the news, or you might have experienced it yourself or spoken to people on your course who have issues. And at about one time, roughly 1 in 3 people suffers clinical level of psychological distress. So it's about 20% of 16 to 24-year-old experience a mental health condition. And we know that if we have postgraduate students here, they also suffer from mental health issue. And however robust people are feeling, they might not see themselves as having mental health issues, but we know that a lot of people feel quite stressed during their exam or prepare for academic work. And working towards exam can create feelings of worry and being under pressure for many students. I don't think it's helped by the fact that everybody goes into exam mode. People talk about nothing but exams, you know, kind of, and people get asked by their families and friends how things are going. So it can feel like just really, really overwhelming when people are thinking about that. So now we're going to look at some of the things that you can do to help yourself if you're going through the stress of academic work, and also hearing those tips that have been written for students, and many of them by students. So when we look at the work of Student Mind, in their research, they found that 83% of students feel concerned or very concerned about performing well in the coursework, exams and assessment in the autumn term of 2021. So this is very recent, and it really shows just how widespread it is. And 67% of people feel that they're concerned or very concerned about falling behind academically. But when we're thinking about stress, one of the important things is not to think that we want to avoid stress. You know, in our life, having stress is a normal and healthy reaction. Yeah. And it can be actually quite helpful when we're thinking about motivating ourselves. If we had no amount of stress at all, you know, we wouldn't make the effort to revise. And short-term stress is a natural reaction to help us manage difficult situations. And it can help us achieve our goal. And it's really important to normalize this, because what we don't want to think is that we're trying to get rid of stress, or we're labeling it as a negative emotion, right? However, we also know that if we experience stress over a long time, it can end up being what we call chronic stress, and that can be feeling harder really to deal with. It can impact on your moods. You can become quite anxious or low in your mood, irritable, feeling overwhelmed. Maybe it's becoming difficult to sleep. So it's not about reducing the amount of stress, but learning how best to deal with the stress that comes from the exam. So let's think about top stress management tips. So we're going to think about keeping things in perspective, and losing perspective is really something that's very common at that time. Getting organized to sort of support yourself and kind of really feel that you can do the best you can. Keeping up with your healthy habits, getting supports and friends and family, and finding a balance in your life at the time of exams, right? So I'm just going to go through each of those separately. So when we're thinking about keeping things in perspective, it's really normal to, as we said, to have stress. So that starts by accepting these anxious feelings that you may be getting. So rather than trying to avoid them, is about kind of noticing them, not getting swamped by them, noticing the stress. Remembering that however much we want to do well in exams, grades are not everything. So when we look at employers such as enterprise, you know, they don't just look at the results and the grades you're getting at those exams. They understand that some people do well at exams, some people don't. And they're looking at the whole person, their achievement, the project, the ability to work in teams, all the other things that are much harder to grade really, and are about the whole person. And everyone copes differently in different situations. Yet there's a lot more that we can do to help ourselves work well with exam. So getting organized, for instance, is one of these things. Yeah, stressing about the exam, not so much, but trying to kind of get organized, working out your basics, you know, doing a timetable when you're looking at all your exams. You can do a plan, you know, you can have it on the board in your room, for instance, and you can plan out week by week, day by day. When are you going to study? What do you need to do and achieve by a certain date, and really move on, not get stuck into this one first exam and then kind of rush to do the other thing. Be quite mindful of how much you're spending on all different things, breaking down your work down in small chunks, forming a plan, organizing your notes, making sure you've got all the handouts. And nobody can work all day, every day. So you need to be realistic in terms of what it is that you can and can't do. Yeah. So breaking things down, maybe thinking about spending, you know, 45 minutes revising, really sort of doing what we call active revising. So you sort of like ask yourself question, answer the question, not just reading at the book and learning by rote. And making sure you plan time to relax in your timetable and do things other than work. And that's really important, because what we find is that we need to keep up with our healthy habits. A lot of the time, people just think we're going to be working constantly. We're going to be working, you know, 10, 12 hours a day. And often that's quite unrealistic. And also, if you start doing that at the beginning of your revision, you get very tired and it becomes harder and harder to concentrate. So it's easier to think about kind of like the the revision instead of long term, thinking about having breaks. There's a reason, for instance, that when you go to class and workshops, they're only sort of 45 minutes. And that's because we find people's concentration start waning after that. So you can use a timer. There's techniques that you can use, such as Pomodoro, that helps you to take regular breaks, but also stop all the distractions when you're revising. When you do take a break, rather than sort of staying on your, sitting down, looking at your screen, maybe looking at social media or going on the internet, make sure you get up, stretch, go for a little walk around the house, maybe put a wash on and hang the wash, or just do something active, rather than just being very static. Keep active. I think often we see that students, when they are revising, they just think they have to stop doing everything and they just have to be very serious. And actually that can be quite detrimental. It's much better if you keep up with your normal routine, get up at your normal time. If you used to go for a run 3 times a week, or if you like to, swim or play football or go for a walk, do whatever exercise if you have some disabilities, and the things that you enjoy doing, make time for them and just keep them on your revision timetable, so you know that they're there and they're just as important. Try and keep your healthy eating as much as you can, drink your water, eat the food that is helpful, get some snacks when you're at the library, maybe take things with you, and make sure that you're eating proper meal. Again, you might feel like a waste of time when you're just standing there cooking, but actually what we find in research that looks as learning is you anchor your learning in your downtime, and often you'll find when you're doing something entirely unrelated, like doing some exercise, going for a walk, doing some cooking, your hands are engaged, your body's engaged in doing something, and you start working through the problems and you remind yourself. So that actually can be really good, that you do other things. Make sure that you get support from your family and friends. Sometimes your housemates are helpful. Other time, if they just stress themselves, they might not be available, but reach out to other people in your life, and make sure that you talk to friends, you talk to family, you talk to your tutors. There's people in the university or in the halls of residence that you are in your accommodation who can help them and support you and will listen. Yeah. So what we're looking at is really finding balance. Yeah. So there can be a mindset when there's deadline, whether it's writing a dissertation or just before the exam, where you just think all you do, that's it, you just knuckle down and all you're going to be doing is study. But actually that's not realistic. So you're going to feel, if you expect that of yourself, you're going to feel bad if you set yourself some tasks and some goals that you can't achieve. But also you will feel it will be very hard to concentrate if all you have in your timetable is to do exam and work, right? So important to just make sure that you have time to recharge physically as well as mentally. And of course, you can't go out every night when you're revising, but, plan something at the weekend where you feel like you've got a treat, something to look forward to, and do some things to kind of let off some steam and relax. It can be really hard not to compare yourself to other people, and people can talk about, I've been revising so many hours, to get that kind of competitive, but try not to sort of compare yourself to others. However, what we do find is for some people, and it's important to think about whether it works for you or not, can be really quite helpful to have a study buddy. Somebody can be somebody who's doing the same course as you, because you can be quizzing each other on your topic and revise together. But it could be somebody who's doing something entirely different, but you walk together to the library, or you sit down in the lounge at a certain time and you're studying and you're revising together, and that can be quite helpful. So if it works for you and you have got some study buddy, then enjoy it. And if you have some people on your course that you get together and do specific course related revision, where you sort of like practice things together, that can be helpful. Really being quite strategic in the way in which you revise, making sure you're accessing your study skill, people, because often we find that it's not just the revision that's important in terms of getting good marks at when you have exams or when you write a dissertation. It's about the way in which you answer questions. So make sure you look at the study skills workshop that you have. Some of them have sort of study specific skill for the course that you're doing, you know, for medic students, for instance, or for law. I know, for instance, you know, I've worked and trained counselors. We have very different expectation in terms of the essays that we want from our student than people, for instance, who might be doing nursing or sports science. So really make sure you engage with your study skill people, look at the handout, look at your previous exam questions. If you have any queries, make sure you give yourself some time and give yourself permission to reach out to people on your course, to the tutors who support you. And as we say, keeping active and doing other things will be really important. So often when we talk about finding balance, we talk about sort of like having, I talk to my students about having the marathon mindset, because people often will think that they want to sprint, you know, they want to reach the peak and they want to get there super fast. But actually, that only works if you are running a sprint. And exam period is more like a marathon. You need to pace yourself. You need to be mindful. You need to be sure you eat, you get enough energy, and you do a sort of appropriate amount of training stroke revising every day. And I'm not a sports person, but I still quite like kind of like thinking about it in that way, because that can be helpful in terms of you're thinking about physical health can often be a lot easier to think about than mental health. But if you think about physical health and mental health in similar ways, you're thinking about, you know, not wanting to kind of create injuries, you're wanting to sort of make sure you listen to your body, all those kind of things that are really important. So it's about being smart in the way in which you're revising. So, you know, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. You're thinking about how you're preparing yourself, looking at your mistakes, learning from them, making corrections as you're going along. So you're not just on the road learning more and more and more, but thinking very smartly about what it is that you need to do, how you're going to do it, getting some feedback, testing your knowledge and your acquisition of knowledge, making sure you rest so you've got time to digest your learning and sort of anchor your learning into your mind, switching up what you study to keep you, so you know you get that sort of like we said, 30-45 minutes, you switch topics so you keep to be engaged with it and you don't get overboard with it. Obviously I'm pretty sure you don't need me to tell you that it's really important that you manage your use of social media and phone. So some people find different strategy, you know, they might put their phone away from their desk, or they have some of the concentration things where you can't access your social media while you're doing your revision, making sure that you've got, I think one of the things I find when I was counseling students is that people would expect that they would work super hard and then they go from working super hard to just going to bed and expecting themselves to kind of fall asleep. And we know that often doesn't. I mean, some people are very lucky and they can just do that. They'll sleep anywhere. But for many other people, actually what you find is you need to have like a wind down routine, right? You need to stop working, eat, have some time relaxing. So rather than kind of going back to studying after having your dinner, then you just go, you relax, you do whatever it is that you do, whether it's going, you know, doing some exercise, going to the gym, watching some favorite series, or talking on the phone to your friends, you know, sitting outside, taking some fresh air. But you really need that kind of wind down and then try and go to sleep, because people find that actually if they go straight to feeling quite sort of highly alert to trying to go to bed, that's really difficult. And then that can feel like people are clock watching, and then they get quite stressed about not finding a sleep. So really what we're doing here when we're thinking about the sort of athlete mentality is about being smart in how you're revising. Yeah, what is it that you're doing? Is it working? Do you need to switch? Yeah, so you might need to do some things that are like in group when you're revising together. You might be doing some quiet reflection, you might be doing some reading, you might be watching your lectures online again. So you might be to kind of like really analyzing what is it that you're doing. Is it working for you? Do you need to tweak it? Do you need to change it? Do you need some support? Do you need to talk to people on your course, rather than just make yourself do more and more without thinking whether it's working, it's not working, not asking yourself the question, trying to learn by rote. So it's that sort of smart learning, smart revision. So now we've looked about all the sort of preventative things that you can do in terms of pacing yourself, making sure you put things in perspective, talking to people, planning very smartly your revision. But of course, sometimes, however well we do, however well we prepare, for whatever reason, things are not working as well as we want them to be. And maybe what we need at that stage is to think about the support that we need because we're feeling quite stressed, right? So let's look at that now. So we're going to look at different places where you can get support while you're at university. The good news is there is so much support available at university. So we're going to go through all of those one by one. So one of the first area where you can look for information is the Student Space website, right? There's a wealth of information there. It was created during the COVID pandemic, sort of gathering all the information for English and Welsh students under one space. So students can sometimes get confused about where do I go for help. So this is a really good first place to look for help. So you have a lot of self-help information that you can access. So you can look at some really good self-help information on the website. There's loads of information, not just about your studies, but about relationship, any concern that you might have about university life. And there's dedicated page with studying tips and tools that can be helpful. So you can look at resources on the website. So you've got, for instance, 10 resources on studying during university. You have some mental health and well-being resources. So we've looked a little bit about some of the preventative things you can do. There's a lot more information on the website. So now when we look at the support at your university, most universities are well-resourced into the support that's available. So go onto your university website, look at the pages on your university that are to do with the support that you can have. So many universities, for instance, at exam time will have some information about how to prepare for exams. So they might have like managing the stress of exam, or performing at exams, whatever. They will have some workshops. So some of them will be run in the wellbeing service. Some of them will be delivered perhaps in the library, so you don't even have to leave where you are, or they might be in the study skills or the advice center. So just find out what information there is. The university, more likely than not, will also have some self-help information, both for studying skills, but also for managing stress and anxiety. Often, you will also have some access to some well-being advisors. So depending on your universities, they might have different names. Some of them might be called well-being advisors. Some of them might be called counselors. Some of them might be called mental health advisors, mental health coordinator. And there are different type of advice available at your university depending on the level of support that you need. Some of you already have a mental health issue that's diagnosed, might be linked with the Disability Resource Center, and you might have access to a mentor that helps you with your studies and might be able to help you with your revision as well, right? So if you go, you can access it from the Student Space, Student Mind, but of course you're probably used to your university website. You go, you find out in the search function, your well-being services. Are they running any workshop? Is there any videos that you can watch? Is there anything that's being organized at faculty level, for instance, that might be specific to your course, helping you to revise and prepare for your course, right? So when we look at the resources that are here to support you, on Student Space, you can see those links. Exam stress, you can have assessment and exam from home if that's one of the things that you're doing, managing your stress. There's some really good blogs on student stories about exams and results. You can have some information for postgraduate research students who talk about stress and what they do to reduce this during their studies. You can look some video and finding focus and motivation for studying, because sometimes that can be quite difficult to generate. You have a video on breathing. That's one of the things that can help us if you're finding that you're quite stressed. For some people, focusing on the breathing can be really helpful, and you can learn different types of breathing. And you can do some exercise. You might be that at the time of exam, your university might be running some relaxation workshops and mindfulness classes. There might be some apps that you can access. And then you can look after your mental health video, thinking again about the preventative things that you can do that we've touched on today. So we've looked at the support. Now let's look at students' top tips for exams, right? What are the key things that students tell us are helpful? So I really like hearing those tips from students, because I think it can feel really easy to hear our colleagues talking to us than having support people talking. So they repeat the same thing as I was saying, really. Don't sacrifice your social life. Make sure you still do things with your friends during exam. Balance is key. Get a change of scenery. Changing your space can really help change your mindset. My house got into the habit of switching rooms to study in when we're working from home, and this maintain your bedroom as a place reserved for sleep and relaxation. So that can be a really good tip. Yeah, you can be swapping bedrooms, or you can go into the lounge, or you can go into a different place. The next tips we have, I think, is a really good one. It's about not expecting too much for each other. I think it's likely that not everyone is going to be on their game. People will forget things, be snappy, and there may be some tears. So thinking about it as a time where everyone is stressed. So taking everything with a little bit of distance and trying to put things in perspective, yeah? Being mindful that people are stressed and not taking things too personally if things are a little bit difficult at home. Looking after your physical health. If you're already feeling anxious and overworked, eating poorly, not being active enough, and not getting enough sleep will not make you feel any better and will affect your performance in the exams, right? The flip side to that is, do not obsess too much about your sleep, because I find like people can get really quite focused on their sleep and thinking about how many hours, just try and do what you can. It's not the end of the world if your sleep is affected, and don't obsess on numbers about how many hours, are people sleeping better or worse than you, and those kind of things. I think that can be also detrimental. So that's coming to the end of the presentation for me today. I've got loads more information that I could share with you in terms of what we can do when we are going through the exam or academic period. So I hope that you have many questions. I always really like answering questions and share my knowledge, and hear maybe from you about the top tips that you have when you're dealing with exams.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. That was honestly such a fantastic session. And I really like that part about the student space. I think that is definitely going to be such a great tool for a lot of students to use. And I really encourage everyone watching to go and check that out, because I know that I would have loved something like that when I was a student, just some resources there. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure the audience has found so many practical hints and tips from today that have been really useful and are going to help them in the future. So I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to us today. So I really want to open up the floor now to any questions. We have had one come in already, which is a great one. And I think I need help on this one as well, Geraldine. So they've asked, what if you struggle with procrastination?
Yes. Well, that is a really good point. I think many people struggle with procrastination, and maybe it's about trying to understand what the procrastination is about, right? So sometimes I find that procrastination can be linked with perfectionism, because people put the bar so high. They think, and I do some writing myself, like sometimes I'm asked to collaborate on papers and stuff. And I know if I tell myself I'm going to write this amazing thing that's just going to be, 5-star research or whatever, it can be really, really anxiety provoking. And the more I'm thinking like that, the more I will put off doing the things, and I'll start thinking about all the things I have to do. I think sometimes you have to game it a little bit. It's like, I know from experience, I don't know for you, but this is the time where I feel like, hey, I really need to clear my desk before I can study. So before I can write. So maybe do that the night before, if you know that having a sort of like tidy desk helps you. I think kind of thinking about the first thing you need to do, the first step, and having it, if you start thinking about a list about What things do you have to do? Think about the first step, really break it down, make sure you understand exactly what you're doing. So sometimes it's about lowering the expectations. So think, I'm just going to jot down some ideas and start making a little bit of a mind map, for instance. And that can really, so you lower the threshold. So you're accessing the task at a lower level. Yeah, I'm just going to write some ideas on the paper rather than I'm going to crack that essay tomorrow and get, aim for a first. So you lower it. The other thing is about sort of thinking, do I really understand what I'm supposed to be doing? Sometimes people procrastinate because they're just not quite sure what it is that they're supposed to do. So if it is a student, talk to your friends about, what do you understand by the exam questions? And if you're still not sure and you've had a discussion with some of the people on the course, you can post it usually on Moodle. You can have some contact with your lecturers or your tutors, or you can book in a tutorial. If you're not sure about how to write an academic essay, of a certain type, I think accessing the study skill people. So again, getting some help quite early on. And often people think, well, I know how to write an essay. I've been writing essays and things like that for a long time. But actually, there's often things we can learn about how we can write better. And if you go to the study skill people, they're really good at teaching those skills. So sometimes it might be that they have a workshop, or sometimes it might be that they have some handouts that you can read in the library. There might be books on kind of like how you can do the certain studies and things. So that can be really helpful. And I think talking to somebody, let's say if you were coming to see me and I was, coaching you, Louise, I would be going like kind of, what is the task that you have to do? And try and kind of like mapping with you, what are the things that are going to help you to achieve that task? Yeah. And what are the blocks in a way? So if you're thinking about procrastination, there are blocks, but I try to reframe it in a positive way. What are the things that are going to be helpful? And often we find when people talk about their task, they might feel quite stuck, like, oh, I really don't know what to do. And then you kind of look at some of the things and you start breaking it down in small tasks. So again, you're thinking about sort of studying or working smart. What is it that you need to do? How are you going to do it? What are the things that are going to support you? Yeah. Are there any blocks? If you're not sure, if you identify that you're procrastinating because you're not quite sure what to do, then that's the thing that you kind of look for help. So you kind of like draw a little list or a map, or you talk it through with somebody. You could say, if you have a study buddy, you could just say with them, well, I'm really not quite sure about how to tackle this. And you could say, the person helps you exploring it. So really asking just open questions. When we did the looking after your mate workshop, we did looking at the sort of open questions. So let's explore this using our open question technique. What is it that is that's happening with this task, for instance? What is it that's going on when you're thinking about starting this task? What would help? What kind of things have you tried? And really kind of like explore different avenues.
I think that's great. I think you're right. I think when you look at something like a full essay or a dissertation,
Yeah,
it can be very daunting. But if you say, okay, I'm going to go to the library today and I'm just going to write 100 words, that's all I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go get a coffee, come back and do another 100 words. I think that's excellent advice. I wish I'd done that when I was studying.
Yeah.
So we have a couple more questions. We've got a really interesting one here from Chrissy, who said, any advice for working alongside your hormone cycle? Really great question, I think.
Your what? Sorry? Your
hormone cycle.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a really good question. Well, I think I would try and think about what are the things, if you feel that your hormone cycle is impacting on you, it might be helpful to kind of map out the sort of things that you feel you feel better at doing, or you feel more comfortable doing at different times of your cycle. If I replace hormone cycle by sort of like energy cycle, for instance, you think, there might be time when you can do sort of more energetic things around, you might be feeling like you like to go to the library on those days, or you like to be with people. There might be time where you just, you're better off kind of just wearing a pajama, doing some reading in bed, or, just gently typing on the laptop. If you feel that you're better off when you're hormonal being with people, then you can again try and sort of like organizing your timetable, more time with your study buddy. If you feel that actually on those days you don't really want to kind of interact socially as much, then it might be that, you know, for a couple of days, you just plan it so you've got more time to just do some writing when you're at home. Or actually, if you're finding that it's difficult to concentrate, there might be things you can do that are not so much to do with thinking, but, you know, preparing maybe your reference list or looking at how you present your work, you know, those kind of things. So really thinking about the task that you feel more able to do at different times of your hormone cycle, and then trying to find ways of organizing your work in as much as you can in ways that fit with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's also, you can't feel guilty for that as well. There's definitely times in a
Yeah.
month when you're going to be more productive than others. So
Yeah.
I can imagine a lot of people probably feel quite guilty if there's some days that they're not as
Yeah.
productive as others. So
Yeah.
great advice. And on the topic of guilt as well, it's not so much a question, but Tracy's popped in saying this has made me feel less guilty about going out for lunch while trying to write an essay or revise.
Good.
That's lovely.
I'm glad to hear that.
So
you know, I mean,
important.
I come from France originally, so I have to say having a lunch break is really important. But I think you need that break. It's going to be recharging your batteries, you know, physically. I think if you have a lunch break and you're with people and you enjoy it, then it'd be a lot easier to kind of like motivate yourself, because you've got things to look forward to. You know, a lot of people, when they get exam time, they just think, you know, if we think about carrots and stick, they just think they're just going to get the biggest stick and that's going to motivate them. And we know actually from research that's not what's helpful. So go and have a lunch break. You'll study better, you know, because you'd have eaten something. You'll feel less resentful because you've done something fun. And if you do and connect with people, then, you know, that'll be even good for you on the social front, because we know loneliness can be really difficult to deal with. So yeah, loads of positive things there.
Absolutely. We've got a couple more questions here. So we've got one from Lonan, which says, what would you suggest would be the best way to manage stress when there are time pressures or deadlines?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think I would do, when there are time pressure and deadline, it's about having a kind of reassuring sort of self-talk. You know, I find like a lot of people, when you have a lot, you can just kind of almost get in sort of like breathless. I've got so much on, I'm not going to do, and it's kind of like really try and calm it down. Some people find that kind of doing a little bit of sort of mindfulness and breathing can be helpful. Some people find the breathing actually stress them out. So it's not for everyone. It's about finding what helps you. All right. And then I'm just going to do the timetable, right? I'm going to say how much time do I have? What do I have to do? And do your priority. So a little bit like you would do before writing, answering an exam question, you're going to sort of look at what is it that you have to do and how you're going to do it, and then give yourself some time. If there is time pressure, and for instance, you're doing an exam, right? It's really important to do it very smartly. So think about the exam. Let's say you have 10 questions in your exam and you have to answer all of them. So be strategic, right? Say, I'm going to give 10 minutes. First of all, I'm going to read all the questions. So I'm not going to start just answering the first one, because he might be the fourth one. He's like the one you know you 100% nail. So make sure you've got time for that one. So you're going to read all your question, right? And then you're going to decide which one you're going to answer. So start from the easiest first, and because you know you've got them in, and really be smart in how you do it, right? And then you just give some time. If you get stuck, you don't try and kind of do it. You just move on to the next one and the next one, and you can always come back and do it. So you're going to really strategize about how you can do it. Again, even though you are under time pressure, I think having realistic expectation, right? So sometimes saying, what do I need to get a pass? Rather than aiming and thinking, oh, I really need to have a first because of this and because of that. And you start kind of like catastrophizing in your mind about all the things that you have to do and when they need to do it. And if you don't get a first, you know, that will be that and that won't happen. And, you know, just really keep it to the task. Try and calm yourself down as much as you can. Still aim for having some realistic expectation. Make sure you've got time to sleep. Make sure you've got time to eat. Yeah. And kind of really break it down in small bites and be thinking about the things that I can do. Think about who can help you. You know, if you've got time pressure, what are the other things that can be there? So
Great advice. Thank you very much. And we've got another question here, and I'm sure that every single person has gone through this, but how to overcome failure and mistakes. We all have them.
We all have them. I think it's accepting that we all have them. that it doesn't mean, it's kind of like just putting it in perspective, because I think sometimes people take failure and mistake personally, and they think rather than I've made a mistake or this didn't work out, like I'm a mistake, I'm worthless, and they start thinking about them. So it's really separating the task from the person. Yeah. In the same way, if somebody made a mistake, I think that can be also helpful, is thinking about how would you respond if it was your mate, right? Because often you'll just be much, much better at helping them, supporting them, accept that, yes, you've made a mistake. I think we all make them. If you need to kind of, make amend for it, apologize, or, see it as a learning thing. What have you learned when you did that? Because often there's learning stuff, what was it that went wrong? Could you have done anything different? Have you learned anything from it? Is there like a skill gap? If there is a skill gap, what can you do to meet that skill? Yeah? And really think of it like that, with like a sort of solution focused approach. What happened? What could you have done differently? Sometimes we make mistake because we didn't know any better. So that was just one of our blind spots. Now we've learned from it. What can we do? How can we do it? Remembering that everybody makes mistake. And sometimes I find whatever it is that's helpful to you, whether you listen to a podcast about, handling failure and rejection, or you can think of it as like, it's just a learning stage. But yeah, putting it really in perspective and separating the task from the person.
So we have another question, which is a great one, which is, I say that about every question, but I think every
That's
question
good.
is great. We've got tips for building self-discipline. I need this as well, Geraldine.
Okay. Well, I think, it's going to be an individual one. I think all of us can struggle with discipline, but I think it's about trying understanding what is it that's going to help us to be disciplined, right? So if we know we're going to do something, and I think that can happen, it's a bit linked with procrastination. I remember if you don't do something and then you wait for ages and then you make yourself work and then you do it and you kind of like can't, you cancel your plans in the evening to do that work that you should have done earlier on, is about kind of like making sure you've got some balance. So you're going to do your work, but then you are going to stop and have your lunch, and you're going to do some work and then you are going to see your friends in the evening. So you've got those treats to look forward to, but also kind of like analyzing what is it that would help you to be disciplined, so in a way you're looking again, as you do with procrastination, about what are the blocks and how can you what are the things that support you. So using your solution focused approach, thinking about, well, what is it that you want to do? And also I think it's easier if you find reasons to do it that are aligned to your values, rather than, I should, like the kind of New Year's resolution, I should be more healthy, I should do this, I should do that. It's like, well, what is it exactly that you want to achieve? Breaking it down in small chunks. And again, having some start by doing the easiest thing that you can do and then build up from that if you're struggling with motivation. Or sometime I've heard I really like this metaphor. It's like kind of run towards the dread. So it was somebody who's saying that they did a lot of wild swimming, and they know that if you go into the sea, you just have to just run and go for it. Yeah. So it was like, so there's different approach and see what works for you. Some people might be like, actually the slowly building your confidence bit. No, I just need to jump up from the deep end and then I'll do it. Or, for instance, the same way you have your study buddy, do you have like somebody who can help you to achieve your goals? So people often find that if you meet with other people for the same reason, it can be really helpful. So you can have your study buddy because that helps you. You know that if it was just you might turn back and hit the snooze button. But if you're meeting your mate at 8 o'clock outside the house to go for a walk before going to the library, you'll do it. So try and really think about what helps your motivation, identify the times when you're motivated and see if there is anything. I think all of us struggle with motivation, the difference between what we think we should be doing versus what we want to be doing, and try and have a dialogue between those two parts. So maybe if you do the thing that you feel you should be doing, because all of us have those things, we can't just be doing fun, nice things all of the time. Maybe I know, so do I. I mean, self-cleaning house, anyone?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to do that, but then after that, I'm going to go out. And when you do tell yourself you're going to have that treat, really stick by it and do it. Yeah.
Perfect. And I really like this idea of a study buddy. It's definitely something that I had one when I was at university. And we have a question in the chat from Jamie here that says, that is a great idea regarding the study buddy. And is there any advice on making sure that you pick the right person?
Okay. Well, I think again, the right person is going to depend on what is it that you need. I mean, I find for me, I'm much more motivated if it's somebody I like. Like I remember there was a time where one of my friends was studying at the same time as me. I was a mature student, and there were a couple of times where we just got together and we would say we would work, and we worked on entirely different things. But that worked really well, because then it was really fun. You know, we'd have lunch or we go out for a drink afterwards, that kind of thing. So, but that worked for me. For somebody else who might be, actually, that's the last thing, because I find I can't concentrate. It's kind of, again, think about the times you've had a study buddy, what worked for you. You know, I don't know, Louise, what worked for you when you had a study buddy, whether it was somebody you liked or whether it was somebody on the course, or both, maybe, you know, and find what works. So I think finding the right person is a little bit, could be a trial and error. I think it might be better to have more than one study buddy, so you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And as we know, you know, exam period can be quite stressful. They might not feel like getting out of bed. So if not, who else can you go with? Or they might be doing, you know, project work or something like that. So
amazing, thank you. And obviously I know I'm not a therapist, but just some personal advice from me is that when I feel that I am procrastinating or I'm losing that self-discipline a little bit, I think changing up your environment really helps. So kind of like what you're saying about, don't feel guilty about getting out. If you want to go and work in a coffee shop or go and work at a friend's house or a parent's house, or just changing that environment up a little bit can really help give you sort of a new lease of life when it comes to work a little bit. So that's what I was trying to do anyway.
Yeah. That's a really good tip.
Thank you. And we've got no more questions, but we still have a little bit of time. So I do actually have a question, Geraldine, if that's okay. You did allude to it slightly throughout the presentation, but what is the importance of sleep when it comes to academic stress? Because I think a lot of students will do that whole cramming up all night, and I'm guessing that probably isn't the best way to go about it.
Well, maybe it isn't the best way to go around it. But again, some people know that's how they work and they do it and they get it done. And I think, you know, you have to be realistic. If that's how they get it done, it works for them, I think, again, you know, and it's maybe not sustainable on a long-term basis, but maybe they do it at one time or something. I think it's about finding what works for you. You know, some people feel like they really need their 8 hours every day. Then I think if they do, it's really important that they do that. And that's the bit, again, about not being influenced by the people. If you see somebody in your house who might just cram up all night and then feel like, oh, you should be doing that, but you know you need your 8 hours, then listen to yourself. You need your 8 hours and let yourself have that. You know, it's all right to leave the party, or it's all right to just go to bed earlier whilst they're doing that thing. That's their thing, right? And I think the bit about winding down, having a sort of wind down routine can be really helpful. Some people find the separating the place they study from the place they rest can be really helpful. That's why I think it's really popular, people going to the library and things like that. So when they come home, they've got a different environment, especially if you're not going to lectures anymore. So there might be places that you can go, like you're saying, you know, switching things around in terms of where you can go and study. Some people find that helpful, finding out what works for you. Some people go back home when that's an option, you know, for a couple of weeks because they feel they can just study and then everything is taken care of. Again, if that's an option and they like it and it works for them, then why not?
So we've got a question here that says, I really struggle to concentrate. Same.
Yeah.
How can I build concentration?
Okay. So first of all, if you really struggle to concentrate, I would say the first thing to do is to check whether there is anything that's impending on your concentration. Yeah. So if you feel that's like an issue, it might be worth having a chat to the Disability Resource Centre, or have a look at the resource and see if there's an underlying thing for studying to concentrate. Yeah. If it's just if it's not something clinical and that requires a diagnosis and reasonable adjustment, then think about the things that help you to concentrate, right? So what kind of things help you to concentrate? Is it that you need small chunks, you know, like in what time are you the best at concentrating? Is it that you're better off when you're working at home and there are no distractions? Is it paradoxically that you concentrate better when you're in a noisy environment? You know what? Some people find actually a quiet library is the worst thing for them. They can do it with the music blaring, you know, they can do it in the train, or like you say, just changing. So thinking about where is it that you study the best? What helps you with the concentration? There are techniques like Pomodoro, for instance, that you can use. I would go and have a look on the Student Space website and look at their resources that Student Mind is developing on concentration. Again, look at the website of the university. Is there anything that helps kind of look at concentration? Trying to find what your learning style is, you know, what sort of thing is helpful to you. So do you concentrate better if you're just looking at things? Do you concentrate better if you read something and then you make some notes and you mind map it? Is it that you concentrate better when you are walking, perhaps, you know, and thinking at the same time? So trying to really identify the things that works for you. If it is that it's because of the distractions, then look at all the techniques that you can use to sort of stop the distractions. If it is that you need to concentrate in different ways, or break it down in small chunks, or vary it, you know, like go from one topic to the next, just try and really identify the sort of things that work well for you. And if you are a student who has a disability and you can have a mentor and you can work with them on that, that can be really helpful.
Perfect, Geraldine, thank you. And I think that brings us to a nice end as well, with it being 11 o'clock. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody for getting so involved in that session. We really had some great questions there, and I know that Geraldine and I really appreciate everybody getting involved. And I definitely learned something today. I now know how not to procrastinate. I know how to concentrate. I know how to have self-discipline. So thank you for that free therapy session there.
All right.
And I'm really sure the audience have got something from that as well. So I really encourage everybody to have a little look at the resources that Geraldine has alluded to throughout this presentation, especially that Student Space and the Student Minds website as well. And if you sort of came in halfway into this, or if you missed parts, or if you want the slides, Enterprise will be putting this whole presentation up on their YouTube channel, and it'll be on various streaming platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram as well, if you do want to catch up on anything that you have missed. But I'm going to say bye-bye for now, Geraldine. Thank you so much again for joining me on this one, and we'll see you in the next session next time.
All right then. Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.